Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition. We're going to talk about a fascinating new movie, which was called Don't Look Up, that just came out on Christmas on Netflix. I watched it with my whole family. It's very unusual, and I think it has something to say about the essential, the cultural battle that is happening over Dungeons and Dragons, and how two sides just can't see each other. All right, so spoilers for 2021. Don't Look Up. All right, so 2021 Don't Look Up is a pretty fascinating film. I was very excited about this because I watched a movie called The Big Short. The Big Short was essentially about a genius stock market expert who called that there would be a massive house crash in 2008. Okay, and he made billions because he saw it coming a mile away, right? And so The Big Short was all about that. It starred Steve Carell and the guy who played Batman. I can't remember his name now. Christian Bale, right? Yeah. And it was a big movie. Well, actually, it wasn't a big movie. It was a small scale movie that not a lot of people watched. That had a lot of Hollywood in it, and was a pretty brilliant film, right? So the person who made Big Short, it was either Adam McKay or David Sorotis. I think it was Adam McKay. Made Don't Look Up. And what's pretty amazing about, and by the way, I think I already said this, but spoilers for Don't Look Up 2021. The person who made Big Short, essentially what he did was he took this topic that nobody wants to talk about and made it interesting and compelling, right? So he did such a great job with this film. At a critic level, it was not commercially successful. Okay, critics loved it though, and I loved it. It was a genius film. It was really good. It was incredibly smart, and it said, yeah, it was quite good. So he took his momentum from that, which was a critical success, and Hollywood will take either one. They'll take a critical success, or they'll take a commercial success. Right? Sometimes you get both, but it's incredibly rare. So, and he made this movie, Don't Look Up, which has Jennifer Lawrence, Timothée Chalamet, and Leonardo DiCaprio, who are three of the biggest Hollywood stars that exist today. Like, it's hard to even explain to you how incredibly, the scale of this thing. This was really this was successful at a level that is just hard to even describe. Okay, so this thing was massively successful. Okay. Actually, it was massively successful at getting named actors to get into the movie, right? I thought it was really interesting because I thought I was gonna, scroll away and on my own. I have like a super computer, beast computer, and it has 4 monitors, and I can go watch my own movies. I like to watch on the big screen in our house. We only have one big screen. That's a choice, for my wife. I'd like to have 7, but she's like, no, we're just gonna have one big screen. But I almost never get to watch anything I want to watch on the big screen. It's kind of rare because there's so much, one, the video consoles are there, and I could be a jerk, and I have the authority in my house to say, hey, I'm using the big screen, beat it, but I don't, right? And the reason why is, I love my kids, and so but there's always somebody who wants to play the Switch on the big screen, or play the PlayStation on the big screen, or do some, and those two things can only really be done right now. I guess the Switch could, anyway. I was amazed. My wife came to me and said, do you want to watch the Don't Look Up together? And I was like, whoa, how do you even know about this thing? And she's like, oh, I was watching James Corden. She likes James Corden. And he had on all 3 of the people, right, at some point, or one of them. She also listens to a few other. And so it came onto the talk show she listened to. So she said yes. So me and her took the big screen on, the night before Christmas Eve. And we're sitting there, the night before Christmas Eve. So, but then my eldest son was home, and he didn't want to watch it, so he was just scrolling on his phone, but he got caught up in the movie. And he watched it because it caught his attention, right? So the whole family ended up watching the movie together, which was never intended. And I was amazed that this thing was able to draw. So one, here's the lesson to learn. Name recognition is everything. If you're going to bring somebody to Dungeons and Dragons, so there's D&D now, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. There's D&D then. D&D 4e, 3e, 2e, D&D 1e, D&D not. Copies of D&D then games. Games that want to be D&D and are not, right? So you got D&D now, D&D then, D&D not, right? D&D now wins because people know the name. And when they see uh and it's fresh and it's new, right? Jennifer Lawrence, she's been off the grid for 2 years. She's back. She's fresh and she's new, and everybody knows her, right? Same thing with D&D 5e, right? I know a lot of people are like, D&D then and D&D not are the answers. They're not. Nobody cares about them. Nobody knows them because they don't have scale. They don't have prominence, right? And they don't really draw people to the hobby, to the game, to unbound immersion and unbound identity, whatever you want to call it, right? There's no draw on D&D then. There's no draw on D&D now at the macro level. They got to dribble. They got to trickle. D&D 5e is a rushing whitewater rapid river, right? So name counts, right? And not an old name, right? Natalie Wood was the Jennifer Lawrence of her day. Nobody cares about her now, right? Like it's the now, right? That's what matters, right? And because of the energy around it and the non-stagnation around it. So that's a powerful lesson, okay? So the movie Don't Look Up is about people looking at the same information and coming away with the wrong conclusions. And the movie tries to say that that's on the right because it's a left satire. It's a satire made by the left. But the movie literally shows it's very much on both sides, right? And that both sides are shockingly ignorant when it comes to the reality of identifying the problem and then putting forward a solution. So what is our problem in the D&D, in Dungeons & Dragons community today? My definition of the problem, how I answer that question is, I think if we do not protect Dungeons & Dragons, it will disappear. We have something special, something unique. This world, like Fortnite and a million other non-important things are coming for it. And the masses will attach to those things if we don't do the work to make sure that something that's precious and important and last and can be lasting if we treat it right. If we don't protect Dungeons & Dragons, it'll go away. I think that's the problem, right? So the D&D thens and the D&D nots are like, hey, the solution is to point them back to this crusty old stuff that they'll love. But the reality is D&D then and D&D not ignore the massive, massive information that says there's no numbers there. There's no momentum there. People who are not old really don't play these games, and they don't like them more than a brand new game that has color books every 3 months and has exciting things like Matthew Mercer and, Ann Woll and the exciting now things, all right? And so they just shove their heads in the sand and like, hey, D&D then and D&D not matter, even though none of the numbers support this, right? Now, I'll say the part where they say back, they say, Scott, you're saying that what will protect Dungeons and Dragons is Wizards of the Coast, but the reality is they don't care about Gary Gygax's legacy, and they're running Dungeons and Dragons into the ground, right? And they're not protecting Dungeons and Dragons, and they don't care about us, and they don't care about Dungeons and Dragons, and they don't care about Gary Gygax. Can't you see all the evidence, Scott? And I do see some of the evidence. One of the new pieces of evidence I just got, Gary Gygax's name is not in every 5e book. It's already being taken out. It's not in Strixhaven. I think Strixhaven is the book that carries Gary Gygax's disruptive, genius, mechanical complexity for the three pillars. It does more to keep Gary's legacy alive than any book. But to my detractors' credit, their point to them, it does not have his name anywhere in it. I looked. It's not there, right? So they're saying, Scott, can't you see that Wizards of the Coast hates Gary Gygax and hates Dungeons and Dragons, is just running into the ground, and it's all going to turn into tears and flames, right? So we're both sitting here with information that we're looking at, and we're not seeing through to the reality. And we both look at the other side and go, how can you not see the truth, right? So it was an interesting film. It's a really, really interesting film. Of course, I do believe I'm right. I do believe that Dungeons & Dragons is Dungeons & Dragons. And if you really want Gary Gygax's legacy to grow and remain and to matter, you stay on D&D now. because D&D then and D&D not, the numbers, the data, the science shows it. They are not growing. They do not draw people in. Matthew Mercer alone has done more, to destroy the numbers of D&D then and D&D not, right? And D&D 5e, that has other people who are pushing it. It really is alive and growing and non-stagnant. So and why am I saying my point again? Because it's my channel, really. And there are others who are, they'll give you the D&D then and the D&D not, points, and they'll repeat theirs, right? So I did think it was very interesting just to look at this thing, and it really was a smart piece of satire. It definitely had problems, but it was worthy of if you have Netflix and you'd like to see a Planet Killer movie that has something interesting to say, it's worth watching. It's not perfect, and I do think it really points to a real question of where are we now, right? And how do we identify what the real problem is? How do we identify what the real solution is? And hopefully what I would like is for this to be a real discussion where we're all civil, but we all bring, our data points to build our pattern and present to the other side. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.